edition of Talking Dogs with Ante. We had a very interesting guest last Wednesday, and it was Olga Seliverstova from Russia. And I have another extremely interesting guest for you this week. One of the persons that is not only extremely well known in the USA, but all around the world for many reasons. And you are going to find out some of these reasons also during our interview. I'm extremely honored to have tonight with us Michael Canalizo. Good evening, Michael, or good afternoon, because it's lunchtime for you.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone else. But here it's lunch, and happy to be with you, Ante.
Great. Tell me, Michael, I will ask you, of course, like everybody else, and we were talking a little bit about it last night and also tonight. How is the situation at the moment in the USA with the pandemic? Because I know that for a long time, the same like everywhere else, you didn't have any shows, but it looks like shows are starting now also in the USA. And you told me that it looks like Orlando shows are going to go ahead.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit.
Yeah, dog shows here are following all the guidelines for being socially distanced, and because we're not a hand-to-hand contact sport like some wrestling or football, we're able to keep the dogs separate. We do have to wear masks. We do have to have temperature checks, and fortunately for Orlando, it's over 1 million square foot building, so we're able to have a really well spread out situation for the handlers, the exhibitors, and all the dogs. And the best part is the people who wanted to get back to work and participate. They're doing their part. They're wearing the mask. They're staying distant. They're leaving the building as quickly as they can. And if everyone stays focused on the prize, we'll be able to have the sport bring back up to the normal speed as quickly as possible.
Yeah. That's good news. And tell me, till now, did you have any indoor shows in the USA, or for the moment you had only outdoor shows?
No, we've had some indoor shows, and again, the taking precautions by not having the big blowing dryers. People are learning how to prepare a dog like we did in the 60s and 70s when you didn't have a generator and you didn't have power in a building. And some of the coat textures are looking beautiful, and people are figuring it out. Bathe your dog at home, take it to the show, just do the minimal amount. But no, indoor shows are happening. And, a place like Orlando, the air changes every 3 minutes. It's not a drag system for the air conditioning. It's a return through HEPA filters. So they don't recirculate the existing air. They pull out the old air and come back in with fresh filtered air. So we're very, trust me, a lot of the details are being addressed to make sure it's a safe environment.
Yeah, and I'm sure that exhibitors and judges in your country are extremely happy that you're putting so much effort in trying to have the things going on, because in many countries it has just stopped, and nobody knows when it's going to continue. But in another way, as much as you are optimistic about Orlando, we spoke now, it doesn't look very optimistic for the Westminster Kennel Club.
That can't truly be said, because that hasn't been officially made notice. Everybody's saying a novena every night that it will happen, but sometimes it's out of the club's hands, and sometimes you don't know to the last minute that they make a decision. So we do hope it does happen for Westminster.
Yeah. Let's hope for both of them that everything will go okay. And anyhow, your president promised that you will have the vaccination before the election, so let's hope it will be that way, and we can continue, all of us, with the normal life. Anyhow, Michael, let's start first with a little bit of your history. You started with the dogs as a small child, and what I read in one of your interviews is that first dog that you had was a rough collie.
Yes, as growing up as a child, we had a rough collie happened to come from one of the most famous collie kennels, Bellhaven, which is in New Jersey, the next state over. So we always had a dog. My grandparents had Basset Hounds and a Boston Terrier. My parents, started when I was about 5 years old. I mean, I could be the poster child for the dog sport of the '60s. It was a family event. We packed up the station wagon, three little kids. My mother and father, and we all grew with it.
Yeah,
My own personal association has gone for the last almost 60 years with anyone who had their first dog from Sonny Shea, who was for the Afghans of Grandeur. I
yeah,
mean, and that includes Dennis Sprung, the Reisman sisters, Jean and Shelley Vaccaro. Roger got his first dog from Sonny. So many people had their start through Sonny, and we've stayed close together, this whole time.
yeah. And I think, if I read it correctly, it was 1957 when your parents approached to Sunny Shade to ask for a companion dog for your family.
61.
61.
She lived within 20 miles of us, and she went best in show at Westminster in 1957. But
Okay.
in 1961 is when my parents made the first purchase of Babu Bam of Grandeur, who went right back to almost the foundation lines.
And
But
why the Afghan? How did you come
it
to
was
that
it
breed?
was my mother's. Yeah. My mother was a beautiful blonde with long flowing hair, and it kind of suited her. The '60s and '70s were, the young people. They were the attraction of the hippie type people,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
free spirits, and I mean, they were very, very popular. There was at one point in the '70s and '80s, you needed 90 in a competition for each sex just to make a 5-point major. Now you need
Amazing.
10. I mean,
Yeah,
that's how
yeah,
far they've
yeah. But
they've changed.
how much did it help for the popularity of the breed? This best in show that she won in 1957. You said that has been a big thing for the breed.
Yeah, well, it wasn't even just for the breed. It was the first hound to go best in show. But what was more important, Sonny was the first woman, the first breeder owner handled dog to go best in show. And at a venerable competition like Westminster, there was always they always felt it was out of reach until Sonny won. And Sonny didn't come from, fame or fortune. She was a hardworking breeder with a great mind, and she won that award under one of the strongest opinions of the day, under B. Godsell, who was a mentor to someone like Frank Sabella. And, it was just I call it a Cinderella story. You know,
Yeah,
she she borrowed Babby Tongren's shoes to, the first time she won at Westminster because her shoes were hurting or something. But Sonny was a great promoter, and so was Kay Finch at the same time with the Crown Crest Afghans on the West Coast. And Sonny would go west and do well, and Kay would come east and do well. But winning, and Kay was also a breeder owner handled. And our breed, maybe because it's all the coat requirement and the uniqueness of the breed, we had many strong, successful owner handlers that could beat any handler any day. Ned Kaufman, Ray Abrams. The list is very long of the successes of owner handled in our breed. Glovina Schwartz recently, Chris Terrell. I mean, they were owners and handlers, and that's what we take with us. We may be, I transitioned into a professional handler, but I was always a breeder first, and I followed my mother's lead. My mother was a very popular judge as a breeder, single breed person, and that's hard to do, but it's proof that you can do it. And Sonny's always close in our minds. We were all novices one day, and when we see somebody showing a beautiful dog that may not know it's so beautiful and know what they're doing, it kind of brings back a moment in time that, like, hey, I was there once. And when I
yeah,
point them first, they like get all excited. It's like,
yeah. I think that's so important for the sport. And as you said, she was the first breeder owner handler, and you wrote in your article it was quite an unknown dog. So in a way, when she won this, she opened the gate for many people who were thinking that something like this can never happen. Uh, how many times did it happen after that
Well,
Westminster has been won by, let's say, unknown dog with somebody who has not a professional handler?
well, traditionally, when you win Westminster, you retire. I mean,
Mhm.
Sher Khan was just the opposite. He had only finished. He was 18 months old, and he had only finished months before. I think he may have won one group ever before, and he went on to win five more breeds at Westminster. But you had somebody like Pat Trotter, who's God bless her, 11 times won the group breeder owner handled, and this is in hounds, but there have been many since then that were owner handled. David Fitzpatrick was owner handled. I think the Beagle was. Chris Terrell certainly was when he won with the Afghan in the 80s.
Yeah,
So here it's very possible. It's
yeah,
there are some areas, and I think we'll get into conversation about it, where there's a little bit of a difference now.
yeah, yeah. Tell me, going back to the past and buying your first dog from Sunny. You said your parents asked her what kind of dog we should buy, and she told them buy a show dog, and you're going to see the world. And it
Oh,
proved very.
you gave away my punchline. I,
Okay.
I was there, but I wasn't, cognizant of the conversation. My father was leaning over an X-Pen at Sonny's, and that in itself is somewhat of an experience. Sonny was eclectic and bright and humorous and loving, but she was not a good housekeeper. We'll leave it at that. So my
Okay.
father says, "Oh, that's a pretty puppy. How much is that one?" She says, "That's $100." And he says, "Oh, and how much is this one over here?" "Well, that one's $150." So he says, "What's the difference?" And she says, "Well, this one could be a show dog. He has show potential. The other one is a pet." And he says, "Well, which one should I get?" And she says, "Honey, you get the show dog, you'll see the world." And
Yeah.
it's absolutely true, you
Yeah,
know.
I mean, in a way, it was very true for your family. You have seen the world because of dogs,
Yeah,
definitely, like
me
many of us, of course.
exactly.
Yeah. Tell me one more thing. When we go back to this story of her best in show at Westminster, which has been special for so many reasons, but also you mentioned it was special because she was at that time a woman in, let's say, gentleman sport. Is it still a gentleman sport or not anymore?
At the time she won, it was more of a gentleman's sport. I mean, the whole sport of dogs was founded, and through hunters comparing breeding stock and gun dogs and terriers that had a job to do and a function, and then it became a social event. I would say it was 80% men in the 50s and 60s and 20% women. And now I think it's totally reversed. I think it's
Okay.
probably 80% women and 20% men um, participating. The women seem to, and it happens to be our core audience. When you do the ratings of the TV shows for Westminster or the national championship that airs in January, our core audience are women from 30 to 45.
Yeah, that's amazing. Tell me before we continue with your let's say childhood and your start with the dogs. I want to tell you that there are a lot of people from all around the world watching the interview. We have regards from Patricia Nemirovsky de Alsina, from people from South Africa, from Finland. Andrew Brace, of course, is there. Finland again. Yanis Flachos saying hello to us from Athens. Trixie Breen saying hello, my brother, have a great time. Charles Allen watching from the UK, and many other people. Diva Racera from Brazil. Many people from all around the world are watching the interview, and I'm happy about that. Because I'm sure that there is going to be a lot of interesting subject that we are going to talk about. Tell me, you said that you won the first group when you were 13 years old, so it means you started to be quite successful as a young boy. But you also got this nickname, Kid Wishes. Why was that? What was the story behind that?
Well, first, let me thank your audience, and you should pay attention because a lot of those people you mentioned should be sitting in this seat at some point in time.
Yeah,
Great
I'm sure they
people.
will.
A lot of us have such high regard for each other. Um, I was nicknamed Kid Vicious because I was a very serious, very focused kid. And it's, I'd walk in the ring and, properly dressed and paid attention, and I absorbed everything. I mean, it wasn't until my early 20s when my association directly with Sunny happened that she took me 40 years in dogs. So I had to experience a lot myself. And to us again, we didn't realize what we were doing, but we knew we had to be perfect. And another a great mentor in my life was Werner and Mary Sheldon and their daughter Jennifer, who had Kabiri of Grandeur, and they were kind of adversaries of Sonny's because they competed locally, and he was very German, she was very out of the box, open gypsy type, and he kept me very focused. He would show we'd practice on his front lawn, and he would show me, you must do this, you must do that, and I did, and my mother was much more, free spirited about it. And at some point in time, it became obvious that I physically, had the ability to run and do it. And so after that group win with the, under it was he was a collie, he Gray Lemur Afghans, but he was also bred collies, Leo Murphy, and she was a beautiful grandeur out of a Turkmen bitch, so she was all out of Babu Bam of grandeur, and the rest just went on. Most of it was homebred for 5 generations.
Yeah. What I want to ask you, you started at some point to work very closely with Sunny and with her dogs, but your parents they also were breeding Afghans. I read under Kandahara prefix. And did they continue to breed them while you were working with Sunny, or how did it go?
The relations we bred my parents' first litter in 1962 or three was out of Sher Khan of Grandeur, and the second one was from the Sheldon's Turkmen bred one. My parents bred clear into the late 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and when it became time for me to break away and look to handle or go to school or make those decisions, my mother started judging in about 1975, and she stayed more involved with her Salukis after that, after the Afghans, and I met Roger Rechtler through Sonny. He got his first dog from Sonny as well. And, that relationship with Sonny and Roger started, and it fostered for quite a few years until Sonny's untimely death. And then I transitioned into managing the kennel and being a private handler for the Grandeur Kennels.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like from your stories and from the interviews that I read that this friendship of yours with Sunny had a huge influence of you on you. And I mean, you have been connected with the Grandeur Kennel for over 60 years now. How did start this friendship? Because at the beginning
It's
you just bought a puppy from her, but later on it
but
became
if
much
you
more.
if you knew Sonny, unfortunately you didn't. But I think Andrew always says one of his greatest not mistakes. He's never got to meet Sonny.
Yeah,
Sonny, everybody was Sonny's friend. I mean, whether you were a male, female, young, old, she just had this warmth about her, and she had this funness about her. She did fun things, and sometimes it got her in trouble, but she was a personality, colorful. One of Sonny's favorite lines when she was dressing up for an important dinner and she comes out with a tiara and pearls and fur. And I said, Sonny, don't you think that's a little much? And she'd look at me and she said, honey, if you can't be chic, be garish. I'm like, okay, but
Yeah.
she got away with a lot, and but Sonny would love everybody. I mean, there weren't many. I mean, she could see through people. She knew when she was being played. She knew when she had to be serious, and I think deep down inside, she wanted everybody to. She guided my parents very well, but she also did what was good for Sonny.
Yeah.
The bitch for $150 was sold on breeders' terms and had 10 puppies, and we got one and she got nine. you know,
Okay.
it's
So
probably
she was
my
also a good
father probably
businessman.
thought that was a blessing in disguise, but she was a good businesswoman, but it was all about Sonny. People did. Roger was so enamored with Sonny, and she, shared the history and the vision and the building of the whole kennel and the line, and he committed to it, and he shared it with her, and after. I think it was like a tribute to her that he kept it going on for another 40 years after she passed,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
But tell
those
me,
dogs
yeah,
look just like what she had then.
yeah. Tell me one thing, Michael. You now spoke about her that she was very happy woman, very friendly and everything. But there was this thing when you were at this gala dinner when you were celebrating 20 years of Best in Show, her Best in Show at the Westminster Kennel Club, when her kennel burned down and a lot of dogs died. Luckily, some of the dogs were there at the party. How did she cope with that afterwards? I mean, that must be a horrible thing for somebody.
Well, what was horrible was when people with dogs had, starting in 1940s, she had a large piece of property, and then it became developed around her, and they built homes and they built businesses, and she basically was on a pretty busy street. I don't think they could ever prove it, but they do believe it was started by a neighbor that just wanted to get her out of the neighborhood. But it was a horrible defeat, because she lost, I think, 25 dogs there, and but she did have 10 or 15 with Roger at the time, and luckily some of it were her best stock, but she lost the true Afghani imports that she was gifted by one of the um, Shahs of Afghanistan, or whatever they were at that time. I don't know what they called them, but she had pure Afghans from Afghanistan there that she was dabbling with. And she lost some of her favorites. It was hard,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah. These things happen, unfortunately. I mean, as much as this was tragical, this event. I mean, her death itself also was tragical because she died in the ring. I mean,
She died in the ring showing she had won with Blue Shar as a puppy. My mother brought her to the show that day because I couldn't go. I was judging a match show in a neighboring state. But before that, 2 weeks before, there was a major fire in a social club that the Afghan Hound Club of um, Southwest Ohio was attending, and Sonny was there. And there was a serious fire with many, over 100 people died in it. And Sonny had some sort of effect from smoke inhalation, probably because she was coughing up blood, like for the few days before when she went up to the show with my mother, and she knew something was going on. She left a card at the house and said, "Give it to Roger for Father's Day," which was not for another 2 weeks. And I was like, well, that's odd. But yeah, she was showing Boy Blue, and she just went up and back, and she was a heavy set woman, and she just collapsed in the ring, and there was no reviving her. It was a horrible day.
yeah, I can imagine. Let's go a bit back now, Michael, because I read a lot of things, and it's incredible how passionately you speak about her and about all this story. Um, I read she had this breeding strategy, which was written in some of the books by this German Shepherd man, Lloyd Brackett. And that's quite an interesting strategy. And I would like if you could explain it to us. And in the same time, I'm happy because we just got a message from Anna Sabo saying that Espen Oge and her are listening very fondly to you, Michael, and that they are smiling every time you mention a familiar name. Because I really enjoyed when Espen was talking in my show about his breeding strategy. Tell me about the breeding strategy that Sunny was using.
It's funny. You use a term that I haven't heard, but I love when you say strategy. You know, a lot of times it's principles, and a lot of times it's this, and but I like the fact that you call it strategy. I mean, a lot of the best breeders that we know have an artistic bend, and they may not have a scientific bend, but they have something artistic for balance and type and elegance. And but in order to be assured that you're going to have predictability in a line, she followed Lloyd Brackett's theory of breeding better dogs. It can be found online. It was a series of articles in the 50s, and he outlines it very distinctly. He had 100+ dogs. Sonny at some points had probably 100 dogs, and in those days you could do it. And but the principles or strategy he set in motion. I mean, most people will identify with his most famous link or genetic connection. It's known as the thoroughbred formula, where you breed a male whose sire is the same as the bitch's mother's sire, or the bitch's mother's sire is the same as the male's. The bitch's mother's grandsire on the mother's side is, I breed a dog to a bitch whose mother is out of the same dog.
Okay.
That sort of thing. And that's the first link. And he takes every precaution to warn people in advance. You can't do this kind of breeding first and foremost unless you have good temperament. He didn't care how beautiful it was or whatever. If it didn't have the right temperament for the breed, he'd tell you don't do it. And second was health. You have to be fully honest with yourself that you're going inbreed and taking a son of or a daughter and breeding it back to that dog. His inbred quotient is remarkable. And there was the way he would do it, and he's kind of like, he was the German Shepherd mentor to like how Oppenheimer was in Bull Terriers. He could tell you, he said, look, if you're looking to improve a shorter back and you have this gorgeous dog with a beautiful head and a beautiful rear and a beautiful tail, but he's long, but you have this dog that may not have the typical headpiece your line has, or the tail may be off, but he's got that short back, you have to go for the back. You need to keep that, whether you showed it or didn't do anything with it. You needed to strengthen it by taking the one piece you were missing. And you do that for 30, 40 years. I could go to dogs in the kennel and know exactly which one's going to give me short hocks, a better croup, longer neck, bigger feet. And, it takes a lot of research. But I'm not sure people today are spending that kind of time, or sometimes the pedigrees just aren't there to do it with. People are breeding one litter and moving on or out, and then you get situations like some European countries where the government sticks the finger in the pot and says you can't breed with a coefficient less than this, and they get involved. And so line breeding and inbreeding isn't able to be done.
Yeah. So mentioning that, because that's something very interesting, and I know that many famous kennels all around the world, actually, all their best dogs were actually the product of line breeding and inbreeding. How is the situation now in the States? Can you still do it?
Here we can do it, of course, but it's a commitment.
I like how you say it, of course.
Yeah, well,
for us it's so difficult to understand.
Yeah, I don't think Mr. Trump cares what we do in our breeding program.
Luckily,
he's not going to get involved. But the key here is there's a unique opportunity, and I've mentioned this before, and it's funny. I just had saw a post somewhere that someone, a very good golden retriever breeder, is breeding to 35-year-old semen. So I would even suspect in Europe, and I'd take somebody like Espen or somebody with a little bit more genetic background than me to see if this was even possible. I've coined the term back breeding. Now that we have this frozen semen, the most recent grandeur litter is 3 years old, and it's out of 35-year-old semen from Triumph of Grandeur, who was Trist's father. And so he himself, he was called Triumph because it was tri for three crosses to Bluchar in three generations. His father was a double. His father was a double Bluchar son, and his mother was out of Bluchar, and it was very, very tight. So now we have this option to use frozen semen and go backwards. Instead of inbreeding, we're reintroducing a solid line that isn't, father-daughter, but it's so intense back. I think it could be very everybody that's done it has had great success. I've been seeing people, and a lot of my friends and other breeds that are going back to it now, and it's going to be a very interesting future for the bloodlines or for the people who are serious.
Yeah, for sure. But now when you mention all these things that we can do now, and in a way we are lucky that we can do many things that we could not, or that they could not do 40, 50 years ago. You also mentioned in one of the interviews that Sunny was old school. If the dogs wouldn't mate naturally,
Absolutely.
she would not use them, and she would never use a dog that was not alive and anything like this.
But see,
How do you think she would now? Do you think she would change her strategy, as I said, or not?
No, a true dog person, a true master breeder would prefer to do it that way. You bred to what was viable, what was potent, and what was virile at the time. I mean, that's how it should be. If they didn't actually want to breed the dog, there was usually a reason. If they didn't free whelp, she would never go back to that. Sometimes it was just basically like, why am I going to spend money on a C-section and have problems? I'll breed to another one that's a good free whelper. We didn't have those options at that time, and it's probably for the best. I mean, Sonny also had a major influence with another very strong breeder of Afghans, which was Juliet de Barclay Leaving of the Turkmen lines. Started in Cyprus and Greece and Corfu, and went to Israel, and it was in England, and she was here. She was the book she wrote. She was called Juliet of the Herbs. She's the one that started raspberry tea for whelping ease, and she had these formulations for almond extract and fasting and everything natural. I mean, her favorite line when she was visiting us says, taking a dog on a walk is like, to a dog, it's like reading a newspaper to a human. Yeah. So she was very big on free exercise, and she was a wonderful, a true gypsy, and this was a woman with an Oxford type education, and she just flew it all to the caution to the wind, and lived as a bohemian, as a Bedouin almost.
Yeah,
a wonderful, another colorful woman in our sport.
Yeah. That's very interesting when we talk about these things, because also when I spoke with Espen and with Andrew and with many people, we come to the point that many things were different in the past, but also in a way they didn't have all these genetic tests or these things, but still they were producing healthy dogs just by this, what you say. They would just mate the dogs who were doing it by themselves. They would not use the bitches who would not whelp naturally and these things, and they were actually all the time keeping the healthy line.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think somehow Espen would be another good one to say if he thinks his influence, but they fed raw food, they fed grains, they didn't have these supercharged supplements, and they didn't have thyroid problems and all this other interference chemically that could alter things. I mean, truly until the late 80s. I mean, I had semen from the early 80s, but we never used it unless I happened to have had the dog on the road and we couldn't get access to them. Was the first time we used them. But we've kind of created the bed we're laying in now with all these vaccinations and all these chemicals and nutrients. And it's the same thing. It's medically we've done that, and then we've changed a lot of dogs physically in appearance with the coat. I mean, we're putting these crazy coats on these breeds that's changing the texture, or we're taking shortcuts, a breed like an Afghan hound, every standard and every recognized registration says shown in its natural state. Do you know how hard it is for someone like me, or it was Sonny, or it was Babby Tongren, or all these breeders would go and see these dogs with shaved saddles and shaved necks and trimmed scissored feet and bottom lines? I see it to this day, and it just breaks your heart that these people are taking a shortcut and not letting this dog have its natural, aesthetic. The breed should be a hunter. They didn't take the breed and open up the palace, put them in gorgeous silky coat and open up the palace gates and say, run down dinner. The hounds that worked for 2-3 days and come back with dinner were the ones that were put on a cushion and taken good care of. So, the people don't understand. It's not just my breed. It's a lot of breeds. They have to respect the function of these breeds. You may be looking at them on a cement floor and on a mats or something, but you have to look at that dog and think, if this dog had to climb a mountain or cross that creek or go in this icy water, could he do it? And if they have thin paper feet and they have no muscle and they don't have the right coat for the elements, the answer is no. And you have to think like a breeder to judge a dog properly.
Yeah, I agree completely with you. There are a lot of comments coming all the time, Michael, and I'm not managing to read them all. But I will just tell you that people are watching from Colombia, from Mexico, Germany. Victor Osado saying, "I love you, Michael Canalizo." The people from Florida, from Sweden, of course, many people from the US. Then we have a message from Nina Viscari saying, my first dog book in 1979 was How to Raise and Train an Afghan Hound, featuring Sunny and her Afghans. My love for the breed and sighthound started then. So big fan and looking really forward to this interview. We have people from Romania. Then Betsy Baiha saying, my parents combed Afghans with Sunny and she handled them in the mid-1950s. Love listening to Michael's stories about her. Andrew Brace is saying, yes, Michael, you are right. One of my deepest regrets was that I never met Sunny. Deborah Serra saying you were one of the greatest handlers ever. Let me see. Diego Garcia saying also you were one of the best handlers. Let me see. Kathy Diener Farrell saying enjoying your history lessons. Then we have a question from Jill Dan. She's saying, what is Michael's opinion on the French Bulldog's reproduction, about artificial insemination, C-sections? You can answer if you want.
Okay, first of all, thank you to all those people with all those good questions. Let me see if I can go back to some of the things you were saying. Not being a bulldog, although I've owned and shown a bulldog, I do know some people that still free whelp bulldogs, and the fact that they still resemble the breed 200 years later has something to say about it. And again, I think it's just something that we've let, they use a word, creep into a line or creep into a breed. In the 50s and 60s, not every bulldog had a C-section or an AI. It just so happens bulldogs happen to be a very fertile breed, that they were one of the very first ones to use frozen semen, and very successfully. But
I mean, her question was about Frenchies, but I think
it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yes.
I just had a friend free whelp 4 4 or 6 French bulldog puppies, not needing a C-section. And I guarantee you, she probably had wonderful wide nostrils, and she probably had a good girth in the hips. And you have to breed for health. I mean, I can't stress that enough. People will make they take this shortcut. I mean, I'm not saying you should let them free whelp if you don't think it's going to happen, but they don't even take the time to think if it's going to happen. They artificially inseminate it. They count out 60 days, and they make an appointment with Espen to get a C-section. I mean, that shouldn't happen. You should breed for a healthy one, and if that one, if she has problems, Sonny would never breed a bitch that had a problem whelper. Then why perpetuate it, because it's never going to correct itself. I mean, that was an Oppenheimer thing, and that was a Lloyd Brackett thing. You find a weakness in your line, whether it's temperament, health, or anything, you get rid of it. You don't you don't encourage it anymore.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you don't need any genetic tests for that. That's also
exactly. We didn't have and it's funny. I imported a couple European dogs, and they never had thyroid problems. They, one, you never checked, but even once I brought them over, there were no problems there. You had a different rearing method. They were healthier. They had more outside time and activity. I watch Anna Stromberg's mother, Birgitta, in Sweden, doing these fabulous dog trick things with the Afghan. I mean, Afghans have a notorious thing that they're stupid. They're not. They're one of the most clever, independent breeds imaginable. But people, you got to put time into it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, as you said a few times already in this interview, people, not only in breeding and everything else, they like to do the shortcuts. But unfortunately, I think not the best results come when you do the shortcuts. Usually, you need to do the things.
It catches up with them. I mean, my mother used to have a very famous saying when a wolfhound would walk in, and such a rustic, hard-coated breed with, that you want that rough coat on them, and they'd scissor the whole bottom line and puff up the legs, and she'd look at him and she says, "This is a gorgeous dog, but what'd you go Hollywood on him for?" You mean like ta-da? And she says, bring him back after he's run around for a while. Jane Forsythe, a great dog mind. She would take a feel of a hound, and if you're showing in like March or April, and she'd take a feel in the muscle and it felt soft, she'd tap you on the shoulder and say, bring him back after he's run around for a few months. It must have been a hard winter. These things matter. I mean, I see judges go through my breed, and it's a breed with all this hair. They never touch a muscle. They never touch the depth of chest and feel for the tuck up. They should have a tuck up like that of another sighthound, a Saluki or a greyhound. These are running breeds, and to be able, I can't tell you how that dog is made unless I take a feel of the muscle or take my hand underneath it and feel the bone and feel some muscle on the dog.
Yeah, that's true. Anyhow, we have 2 more comments. Chris Amo is saying, you are my favorite handler. One of our fondest memories was sitting ringside watching you show Tris to Best in Show in San Diego. And then we have a message from Claire Millward saying, I can listen to Michael for hours. When I first started in Afghans, I always looked up and took inspiration from his handling. Watching Michael and Trist at the garden is something I'll never forget. So you see, you have been inspiration for many people. I think that's always nice to hear.
And the important part for these people, and a lot of people that you've mentioned are just as talented. The important part is you need to share when you see a special moment with a person, or you see a young person with a great talent. I mean, Diego is on there. Let me take a sip here.
Yes.
And I remember seeing Diego. I think I might have seen him in South America, but before he came here. And this boy was blessed with talent, and when you see it, you just have to let him know, stay the course, stay smart, do whatever you have to do, and we'll be there for you. And they become great handlers. I get emotional about it. So
Yeah. Well, that's nice. I think there are not many people still who are so passionate and emotional about the sport like you. This is why I think all these people are enjoying so much this interview. But let me bring you back now to the history, because we have gone a little bit now to the present. When Sonny died, Roger Reckler, you said he continued with her kennel and with her dogs. How did you start showing the dogs for him?
Okay, well, Roger didn't just take over Sonny's dogs. Roger had a relationship with Sonny after he got his first dogs with her for quite a few years. And after the fire, Sonny moved in with Roger, so it all intensified. And now he's building a kennel and this sort of thing. And Roger was a real Renaissance man with a great mind and creativity. And he just, and dogs were natural to him. But Sonny um, basically hired Roger, had the insight or the to say, Sonny, you can't keep running like you're running with these dogs. We need a pair of young legs. And my mother was transitioning into judging, and I was, starting to show other people's dogs, and so I came aboard to show just for Sonny. I mean, Sonny and I traveled up and down the East Coast showing the dogs, and when Blue Shark came along, that was my dog to show. Um, and when he was only a puppy when she died, but I would take Sonny to the shows, and I showed him at his very first dog show at 6 months, and he went reserve under Ramona Van Court in an entry of 120 to Glovina Schwartz's Spellbound. And the next time those two dogs met in the ring was a year and a half later, and both were champions. And Spellbound was the number one dog in the country, and Blue Shaw was his second time in the ring as his champion, and he beat him for the breed. And that was, that was when you go back to the Kid Vicious thing, and I shared a term in probably an interview you saw. I said, they say, what's your favorite comment? And it was, you become what you hate. There was a time when, you know, um, a good friend of mine had a specialty, had a beautiful bitch, Jay Hafford, with coastwind anthiopy, and he was out against Pepsi and Blue Shar and all these great dogs and bitches at the time in the 80s. Um, and all he wanted to do was win one specialty. Well, guess what? He becomes a top specialty winning bitch. And when I first showed Blue Shar, it was go Michael, get Glovina, because she had the number one dog. And then somehow he became get Michael. We each gave it a good run. I had the number one Afghan for 11 years in a row in the U.S. Not easy to do. And now I have the number one Afghan hound 30 years later with the puppy out of TR from that 35-year-old litter. Seaman.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. I mean, the whole story about this is amazing, especially because when you talk now, and I don't think that many people, younger generations, understand what was the quantity and the quality in the breed at that time, much more than now.
I can give everybody a real snapshot of how strong the Afghan hound breed was. In the 80s, Blue Shaw won the group at the World Show. Chris Amu's uh, Viscount Grant won Crufts. Pepsi won Westminster. I want to say one of David Roche's dogs won the Sydney Royal. I mean, it was the most incredible time. When you would look at the statistics for the top 20 hounds, 10 of them would be Afghan hounds. Yeah. I had a judge, Council Parker, who was a popular judge, knew our breed well, and he once said to me, Michael, this is the fifth Afghan I've given a group to in a row, and it's not no one dog won more than one group. I mean, it was such a strong time for the breed. Yeah. And it's not an easy breed to show.
That's for sure. Anyhow, also I read in this interview that one of the first things that Roger did once he took over the kennels is to close the kennel for the public stud.
Yeah.
Why did he do that?
All right. It's. I think it was part as a ode to Sonny. I mean, Sonny and Roger and I would spend evenings. They all laugh because they'd be having coffee and I'd be having Oreos and milk. But Sonny dictated into a little tape recorder at the time the history of the breed and her involvement. And at one point in time, especially after Sher Khan became very successful, Sonny had a lot of criticism for, as I put it, a lack of her, bookkeeping skills. And there was rumors going around that maybe this dog wasn't sired by Sher Khan or this one, that. And it kind of, she took it personally. And even when she died, people would say, well, how do you trust those pedigrees? And I'm like, I don't care what you say. A true breeder would never mess around with what she kept for herself. I don't care what anybody else out there thinks. But that wasn't the reason we went private. We did because Sonny had Sher Khan. He was a top producing sire for a long time. And as a proponent for inbreeding and line breeding and following Lloyd Brackett, she was amazed how few, I think there were virtually no people that ever came back to either use Sher Khan again or breed a bitch out of him back to him. And she couldn't understand that. I mean, and trust me, they got a good dose of proper type and elegance and lightness and athleticism. The breed had kind of two schools. They had the heavy coated black mass reds, and then they had the more elegant sleek black ones, blacks and blues. And the Sonny could balance it out. So she was a little disappointed that nobody went back that way. Now, Sonny did breedings and sold puppies because it was a livelihood for her. She was a stock woman, and there was no shame. And right now, the American Kennel Club would do better to have people breeding dogs and selling healthy and well-bred dogs before we lose sight of this altogether. I mean, and they're working very hard at it. But Roger was not in that position. He was a very creative guy. He had his own worth, and he didn't need to sell dogs. It didn't matter to him to survive, for a stud fee. Sonny, and I'll share this with you because it's something I don't say very often, but the people closest to the source know it. People always say, and you haven't asked it, how did you meet Roger? And I was successfully showing dogs, and I had my own dog, and I flew to Arizona to a show, and Roger flew to Arizona with his then wife with the first dog they bought from Sonny. And I knew who he was. I had never met him yet, and I could see him watching his dog being shown, and there were people standing next to him that were basically ridiculing. That's a grandeur puppy. Look at those lanky legs. Look at this. And Roger was getting, now I know the tell, how he'd rub his chin. And I could tell he was affecting him. And so I went over. I had gone reserve win his bitch, I think, under Ginny Withington that day. And the puppy did win his class, but maybe there wasn't so many there. And I introduced myself. I said, Mr. Reckler, I'm Michael Canalizo. And he says, I know who you are. And I said, I just want you to know, I know you overheard those people making fun of your wife with the funny looking puppy, but I want to tell you something. That's a very typical grandeur dog. Though they grow the legs fast, they need time to mature, and he has beautiful type about him. And I said, then don't listen to those people. And so he thanked me, and he got a little bit more animated, and he says to me, oh, that's really nice. He says, Sonny just sold me another puppy, and she thinks it's the greatest one she's ever had. And I looked him dead in the eye, and I said to him, Mr. Reckler, I don't know you very much, but I do know you're a man with a lot of money, and Sonny isn't a woman with a lot of money. And Sonny always had the next great one to sell whenever the dog food bill was due. Yeah. I said, don't go overboard. Take it one at a time. And we just kind of left casually. And that was in November at the Phoenix Specialty. And a few weeks later, I get a phone call from Sonny. And like, kid, I don't know what the hell you said to my Roger, but he's having a party and he wants you and your parents to be here. And I'm like, when is it? And then she gives me the date. I said, Sonny, I can't do it. At that time, I was working for a major veterinary hospital with a rotation for the University of Pennsylvania. And that was the weekend of the finals for the vet students. And I said, I've got to be in Pennsylvania. And she says, I don't care. We'll send a car for you. You got to get up here. You got to get up here. Long story short is I got up there and we had that was my introduction to Roger. You treat people squarely, fairly, and it's a story of my life. The truth will set you free, whether you're judging, whether you're dealing with the person, and I've always lived by that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not so easy to say, but you have to say it. And in retrospect, it was probably the greatest 10-minute conversation I had in my life.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Anyhow, we have a comment from Trixie Breen. She's saying Roger had a great eye for all things. Patty Keenan saying the Afghan breed in the 80s was incredible. Growing up on the East Coast, witnessing it week in and out was amazing. Andrew Brace is saying, I think Roger's generosity of spirit was remarkable, and Michael perpetuates that gift. So let's continue, Michael, with this story. When we talk actually about you and the Granger Afghans, there is always this image of you and Trist that comes to everybody's mind. What was so special about that bitch? And I mean, not only about her, but two of you as a couple.
Well, it's funny. Someone will say to you, who was your favorite Afghan hound of all these wonderful dogs I've had a relationship with? And it always went back to Blue Shar, who was Trist's double grandfather. Trist was out of Triumph, so that's 3 or 4 crosses there. And Trist's mother was a Blue Shar daughter, whose mother was a Blue Shar daughter. But Blue Shar was an Afghan hound. The first one I showed, I mean, from day one, he had something special and unique, and he's the one that we followed Lloyd Brackett's theory, based everything on. So none of these dogs would have happened if it wasn't for Blue Shar's, value and potency as a sire. So I give all the credit to Blue Shar with his mind, and I see it in so many of the dogs down the line. But Trist Triumph was a little bit more of a throwback. Blue Shar's father was a highly patterned blue dog called Boy Blue of Granger, and if you knew the history, and Afghan people listening to this will understand it, history has a way of repeating itself. Sher Khan's father was Boy Blue of Granger, and no, Blue Boy of Granger. The Shah's father was Boy Blue. Another highly patterned, very exotic dog that produced Sher Khan. And so this Boy Blue gave Sonny her other Sher Khan. And it just kind of like goes through there. Triumph was a throwback. He was a very powerful pattern dog. I mean, it's something Kay Finch would have loved, and the judges, Frank Sabella, was another great mind, and Annie Clark, people that knew our breed inside out, gravitated to this dog. And one of them said to me, I don't know if this dog is 40 years too early or 40 years too late, but this is the dog that you have to look at. And he attracted a novice, he attracted a veteran opinion, but he was that kind of dog. And whereas I went from that houndiness and that big open, sort of gait, to Trist, who was the lady in the long gown flowing out of a Rolls Royce. Yet she had this impeccable attitude. Most people don't realize it. Trist could never be shown on a tight lead. I had to have the leash sitting on her withers, and she wrote her own rules. And sometimes as a youngster, she'd blow up and just be, okay, you're having a moment. But most times she was just so appealing and natural. She just floated. And there were 4 black bitches in the litter, and we called them the Slut Sisters, because everything out of TR Triumph carried TR in the names, and we had Trist, Trollop, Tramp, and Trixie. Mm-hmm. And so those were the 4 black bitches. and I think they all finished, and we had one that we kind of liked even better, but she didn't have Trist's wonderful attitude, and Trist got parvo or some sort of bacterial or a chest infection, and damn near died. I mean, Joe Dubler from the University of Pennsylvania told us, Michael, you probably should. The right thing would be to put her to sleep now. She's not going to make it through the night. And we said, just give it a try, and she got stronger and stronger and came back and lived to be a very old bitch and road worked every day. She was just a very, and I say that about a lot of great dogs. These dogs, whether it's whether it was Mick or the Shepherd Manhattan or Mystique, they have a different DNA. These dogs, I see them. I've on the road with them. They know when to sleep. They know when to eat. They know when to run. They know when to relax. They never met a stranger. These are very unique dogs, and I think you see that at a young age, and I'm dealing with it now. I have this dog that they can't believe this is an Afghan hound. Even when he went to the vet, he says no vets ever want to see an Afghan hound. He says your dogs come in, they jump up on the table and give you kisses,
Yeah, yeah.
and you can be a strong hound in the same time. So I mean, it's amazing,
Yeah, yeah, it's one of these dogs that they are born and you never forget them, and it's not only that they have influence on you, but I mean, Tris has such a huge influence on dog people in general. I mean, I don't think that there is a serious dog person who doesn't know about you and her. So that
Well,
has also.
Trist did something very unique in the world of the dog sport. Trist had 116 best in shows when we stopped her to have her litter. She had two subsequent litters. They were small, and I finished the bitch out of the first breeding, and then the way things happened, I had started another bitch that won quite a few best in shows, and the dog I wanted to move on with wasn't able to. He had hit himself on a tree and burst a lung vessel or something, and it just wasn't going to happen. So we brought Trist out at 8.5 or 9 in full coat, and she won 50 more best in shows. And that seldom happens when you bring a veteran out, especially a coated breed. So she really proved herself. I mean, and like I said, road work 3 days a week, every way. They'd see me, well, not me. I had Anna Stromberg at that point there, and my other European import, wonderful Anna, came to help me after a hernia repair and never left. Would have been cheaper if she had married me instead of getting all the. She came right after 9/11, and we had all this. You couldn't get a visa and this and that. First, she came as a au pair for one of Roger's grandchildren, and then she stayed, and obviously stayed on and has made her own mark
Yeah.
in the sport.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me another thing connected with you and Tris, because there are no many dog people who have a story about them and the jacket. I want to know the story about this special jacket, because obviously it is
Well,
something quite special.
the short and skinny of it is, I know far more people that can tell you who wore the jacket and what breed it was than can tell you who went best in show that night.
Okay.
Okay, so I had it was again being kid vicious, being focused, being attentive, not just going in there. I lost. I'm in the car and I'm out. I stick around. I listen to things. I had a good ear to the ground. Always did. Still do. So when I hear these things that go on, I either nip it in the bud or I, enjoy the moment. I get a win from Dr. Indeglia at a little show in the summer, and I'm wearing this tropical linen number with palm trees and color, rust and turquoise. And he's a heart surgeon. He says to me, just casually, he says, "Man, you wear the greatest looking jackets." He says, "I wish I could wear stuff like that." And that's all. End of story. And that was a month later. Comes out he's doing best in show. Now, Roger and I both were not great shoppers. We didn't like to shop, but we had a men's store nearby that would put a sign on the window that said inventory tonight, closing at 5. And Roger and I would go in there and we'd buy all our clothes for a year. Yeah,
Hmm.
sometimes I'd go in. So that this particular time I'm walking through the mall and I see this jacket, the sequin jacket on a dummy in the window. And I pop my head and I say to Carlos, I mean, trust me, when Roger and I shopped, they knew your first name. I said,
Okay.
Carlos, I said, that's a great jacket on that in the window. And he turns and he yells back to some other staff and says, Mike loves the jacket in the window. And I said, do you have it in my size? And he says, he wants to know if we have it in his size. And they yell back, we only have one. And so I said, well, what size is that one? He wants to know what size that one is. And the next thing you hear, who else's size would it be?
Yeah.
Well, this was in 1994, I think, and it was $1,500 Michael Kors jacket then. It's
Hmm.
still hanging in my closets, by the way, in case I ever have an appearance on that green carpet sometime.
Okay.
Might have little velvet panels on the side, but okay. Um, so I bought the jacket and I didn't wear it in the breed, and I did win the breed under Rafael Santiago that day. And I'm about to go in the group, and they have you like in the ready ring, collected over there. And Anna comes up with this garment bag, and I take off my other attractive velveteen jacket, and I unzip the bag and I put it on. And Michael Scott was the first one. He had the Basenji behind me. He looks and he says, "You're freaking out of your mind." And I'm like, "It's a dog show." And all of a sudden, bring in the hounds. And I go and I win the group. And this guy named Harvey, who was working for NBC at the time, comes up to me with this chart and he's flinging all the flares and says, "Look at this, look at this, look at this." I said, "What am I looking at, Harvey?" He says, "Our ratings have been going up 10% every 5 minutes since the moment you came out." He says, "I don't know what's going on." I said, "I know what's going on." He said, "It's every gay man in America calling their friend and saying, 'Go look what's on TV. You're not going to believe it.'" I should have had
Okay.
lots of
Well,
dates that year. Maybe if I
yeah.
wore it again, I would.
Yeah.
So that was the
Yeah.
story of the jacket.
Yeah. Okay. That's quite
Now let's get
interesting.
back to
Okay.
serious dog talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, my last question about wrist for you. I read in the same interview that you have harvested her cells for cloning, if that will ever be possible. Do you think that that will ever happen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny. Who just told me? I guess Evelyn, Roger's wife, I live on the property here with her and I see her every day and the dogs every day. And she said someone had, I think it's like a famous star. I don't know if it's Barbara Streisand or someone like that has had successfully cloned dogs now. And so I said, oh, maybe it's time we think about it. It's certainly easier to clone one than to have a litter of eight again.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
for sure. But yeah, but you want to do a shortcut now, and you said that's not a good way.
well,
So
it would, but the thing is, again, foresight, thinking of, I mean, when I was doing active breedings, and trust me, I was as involved as Roger was, and Sonny's thought process and line was always in the equation. We knew where we were going 5 years in advance of getting there. So when this first thing from South Korea came up with the cloned Afghan, and the Afghan line is somewhat of a very pure genetic makeup, and it made sense to us. We said, look, we better do it now, because if they ever perfect it and we didn't take it then, you wouldn't have it. The same thing with semen. You collect semen on your dogs while they're young and virile, before something happens to them.
yeah, yeah. Well, that will certainly be something interesting. But let's see if it's going to happen during our lifetime. It would be for sure amazing. But okay, let's not go so much into future. I want to ask you one more thing. This interview that you sent me by email. I don't know I couldn't find in which year the interview was done. But one of the questions in that interview was, do you regret that grandeur exists now only in the history books? And then in the second email, you sent me the photo of the current top winning Afghan male in the States, which is a grandeur. What did it happen in between? So if I
Well,
understood well.
it really, we were okay with it. Roger and I had once discussed making a dog a public stud dog. And the rationale was we were going to require that they buy two stud services in upfront, and you were entitled to repeat the breeding or breed back to a daughter. And just by virtue of that, and the fact that the bloodline for 30 years hasn't been, accessible, people, that dog would become the top producing sire of all time because we knew that with the quality. But it wasn't so much that dissuaded us. What dissuaded us from doing it? We knew we, now the stud fees are $1,500, $2,000 or something, the price of a puppy. I could even be shortchanging it now. But we said, within 5 years they'd go off on their own way, and it wouldn't be recognizable grandeur type. And so we said, no, we'll be all right. And when the last litter was 12 years old, Evelyn realized, we're not going to have another Afghan in the house unless we did something. And so Jean and Shelley Vaccaro, again, the Vaccaro name started with Sonny in the early 70s, late 60s. Taj Marimbad of grandeur was in the late 60s. They had a very successful litter out of the Kid Sox dogs who won the Group of the World show. And I put up when I judged at Bratislava at the World Show, and this dog was a top producing sire in the U.S. without ever setting foot here. And that was from an all champion litter, and so we did a breeding. And let me tell you, to me, the minds are grandeur, the quality is grandeur. I mean, it's the Vaccaros. These puppies came out never leaving the grandeur property, and every one of them, that people would just say to me, how do you do that? I mean, truly, they never left the house. I mean, my dog came out after not being in a show ring since February and never missed a trip. It's just a natural thing that goes with proper temperament again.
Yeah. Michael, when you, I mean, we spoke a little bit about this, but when you look at the Afghans from the past, or Afghans when you were starting in the breed, and when you look at the Afghans of the present, how do you think is the future for the breed?
Well, the term that we use here in the States, you have fads go through a breed, and it's cyclical. It goes up and down in a wave every 15 years or so. And you see it. And if you have a lot of serious breeders, I mean, back in the day, I mean, we would go to a specialty and you could that's a dynasty dog, that's a coastwind dog, that's a Jen Araby Saluki. That's a Srinagar Saluki. You could look at a breed in a lot of breeds and know exactly where it came from. Can't do that these days, except for very few kennels that you can still look at and know and be right where it came from. I mean, the social mores changed. People couldn't breed as much, and people weren't buying dogs like they used to. The younger people have the internet and all these other activities. They're not so interested in showing dogs as long and as much. But you could just tell, what it was. And now, again, with all this hair and all these product, I mean, I cringed the first time I ever saw a curling iron being used on an Afghan hound. I'm like, what are they doing? If you have a proper silky coat, it's gonna hang straight. We did a few outside breedings with Blue Shar early on in the 70s and early 80s, and we got a puppy, and it was lovely, and it didn't drop his saddle when the rest of them usually did. And I'm like, okay, I guess I went through the whole shebang of stripping it and thinning it and pulling it and yanking it, and Oh, it's beautiful. Well, it was back in 2 weeks, and then I'm doing it again. And I said, the standard says naturally present, distinct, outstanding characteristic of our breed. And when you let something like that get into a breeding line, you no longer have a natural saddle, and everybody's stripping it. And now I'm looking at artificial pulled out saddles, which is just a shorter version of the side coat, and it's not a shiny, smooth saddle. And then they, tails. I mean, I haven't seen a natural tail in half these dogs in 20 years until a poor entry level breeder wants to use your stud dog, and you're not straight up with them to tell them you better bring it back, when it's 4 months old or 3 months old, whenever they do it, and let me see its tails. And all of a sudden, I see this beautiful litter of Afghans with Irish setter tails. Be fair. And there was a certain generation, and I'm sure Andrew and some of my respect does go for the Swedish and the English because they are pretty much upfront. They don't take these shortcuts. They don't allow them. And maybe we'd be better off if we didn't allow, cosmetic stuff to be harder. And in our breed, when they say, and judges will say, and I'm faced with that dilemma too, when I see a dog that's artificially enhanced and with a color or texture or something, and I'm not going to beat a good dog to a lesser quality dog as to the degree of breeding stock overall for quality and soundness, but I will drop it at some point. It might have to give it the breed, but when it walks in the group, you're not getting a placement because you offend the standard in that degree. And some judges don't look at it like that. But the Afghan hound, it's very particular. Two strong points: not to be scissored or trimmed, and the natural saddle needs to be present as a mature dog. So when you don't see that correct saddle, if they know what the correct texture should be, you can penalize it, and you can make it a deciding factor when you're judging. And there are lots of breeds that have that same sort of, requirement. Yet when you go to a breed like the poodle, and if you break down standards in their words, and Frank Sabella was a great teacher in this, he would say, Michael, there are words, if they're repeated repeatedly, they carry more weight. If they're in bold print, they carry weight. He says, but every word, sometimes when it comes earlier in the sentence, or our biggest question was, he called me up crazy about something when I screamed about him putting up something with temperament. And I said to him, Frank, read the standard. Aloof and dignified, comma, yet gay. And he says, oh yeah, but aloof and dignified comes first. So he was making an excuse for it. But when I was saying about poodles, they use a word, carefully groomed. So that gives them a little liberty to be able to be enhanced and shaped. They ask for the right outline, and it has to conform to a certain clip. So when they use the word carefully groomed, and some of these, there's a new breed standard that I just read, and they said, well, we want it shown naturally, but you can trim the feet up to the hock, and you can trim the tail, and you can trim around the anus, and you can trim the throat. I'm like, oh, come on, the door's open. You're going to have a Bichon in 5 years.
Yeah. But talking about all these things, and going back to the Afghans, what do you think at the moment is the biggest problem of the breed?
Of the breed?
Yeah.
I would have to say we're fighting an imbalance. The breed is decidedly square, particularly square in the U.S. standard, and we're losing the squareness of the breed and the indicators of that. It should be able to go up rocky mountainous terrain, which means the feet are thinner. We're getting overdone rears, which wind up with sickle hocks, and they have, the standard. And our standard is a wonderful standard. It calls out specifically the rear leg lands where the front leg takes off. And someone like Joanne Reed, who is famous in chows, who is also a vet, she would tell you, if that rear leg lands 2 inches short of the front leg, that dog's 2 inches off square. And you have to train your eye to see these sort of things when they're asking for a square breed or a breed that's slightly longer. And if you couple that overdone rear with a straight front, you get a lot of parade gait. The head has to be thrown up because the front needs to get out of the way, but it's not correct. An Afghan hound should have a parade gait. It should prance around the ring like shock absorbers just barely hitting the ground. And that goes hand in hand with the muscled loin and the muscled, propulsion that you get from the rear. We also ask slightly bowed from hip to hock. And you're seeing these rears that are absolutely straight without any sort of bow and tall hocks. I mean, so I think that the balance has changed. And how did I used to put it? It looks like the hood ornament of my grandfather's 58 Buick. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, they've changed it. It's not the windblown standing four on the ground. I mean, Kay Finch, all the artwork she ever did, huge big feet. With the windblown, with the chest, with an angle and the crazy top knot. Now the losing sight of the function of the breed. We've made it into a caricature, I think. Connie Miller warned us in the 70s, and for a while there, we reined it back in because she was always in our head. Another great Afghan sighthound personality that impacted. I mean, I don't know if these people even research and do, like my mom says, they don't do their homework before they enter into a breed. And as a judge, too, you have a responsibility to figure out what this breed's function is, where are the weaknesses, where are the strengths. And when you go into judge, I don't care what breed it is, that person expects you to give them an expert opinion. And to me, I think any breeder that was a successful master level breeder can evaluate any other breed. I can't tell you how many great breeders and Irish setters and pointers or, poodles would look at my puppies and never be wrong. And I could do the same in their breed. And you had a better communication in those days. Now, God forbid, you walk through the grooming area in the States, oh my God, he's in the grooming area. Well, hell, we used to, hang over the X pens grading everybody's puppies. I had Lacey, Lonesome Dove, lead breaking her at a show, before she ever became famous. I mean, those opportunities are lost on a lot of people now.
yeah. I think it's for this reason I say it quite often that I think that this Corona pandemic was one of the best things that has actually happened to me, because you are my 21st guest, and I mean, I learned so much talking to the people. And I mean, I know you personally, and most of the people I talk to I know personally, but you never have enough time to go into details like this, and you learn so much from this, and I think it's so important. So
Let's hope they
I
listen.
yeah, let's hope they listen. I agree with you. Okay, enough for the moment of Afghans and breeding. Tell me a little bit about your career as a professional handler. And I also want to ask you, when you compare the professional handlers when you were starting and the professional handlers of today, do you think we are going in a good direction or not?
I, again, Kid Vicious, was in the ring with the greatest of the handlers. I was in the ring with Forsyths and Sabella, and Annie Clark was still showing. And, a lot of these, Mike Billings. As a professional handler, I was in a different class. I mean, the cute side of it was I would act like a professional handler. I'd get to the building the night before to set up my equipment and be ready for the morning, and this and the other big time handlers, Bobby Fischer or this one or that one, would be yelling, "All right, here comes Canalizo with his strung. Make room for his strung." And you go with a string of dogs. I had a strung. You know what a strung was?
What?
A string of one. But
Okay.
I'd be there and I'd be ready. And I'd have an assistant, with Anna,
Oh,
And so I acted like a handler. I did all the right things, to take care and put your dog's health and, concerns first. Um, it's an art. I mean, the handlers have it's not a luxurious, fancy job. I mean, I was fortunate that I could do it the way I did. But these people that are out there week in, week out, with all this responsibility of the care and the maintenance and keeping everything in check, it's a hard life. And the ones that can still do it now are fabulous. I mean, I wish we didn't have as many shows here in the States that they could give the dogs more time home and stuff. But the conscientious ones, I see them out there with a bike or a golf cart giving the dogs exercise. But and then their expectation, as a handler, I did my dog at home. I bathed it and I went to the show. I just did 5 shows with Simba and never had to bathe them in between. I wouldn't think of going to a dog show and having bathing stations supplied by the dog show and power. We didn't have that. We didn't have generators. We did it home. I mean, our first blowing dry in Afghan hound was to take the vacuum with the suction and sitting on the ledge of the stove to pull warm air out that came out the blower end. That's how we used to dry Afghans before we had stand-up dryers. Now they just go from show to show to show and have this expectation. And they've, some of them, it's not their fault because we've enabled them, unfortunately. And that's kind of like what I like about some of the European shows. You go to a show, there's no power. You go to Crufts, there's no X-Pens, there's no bathing stations. And let me tell you, they all look fine by the time. And the coat textures are beautiful. So we're changing little things that, we don't need to. But the handling profession, it's still a passion. And if you're not talented and you're not careful, you go by the wayside. We don't have many that you wouldn't entrust your dog in. The dog world's small. You're not doing something right, whether you're a handler or you're a judge or you're a breeder. People find out, and you put yourself out of business.
That's true. That's true. We have hello from Bucharest, from Petru Muntean, saying what a great lesson. And then Andrew Brace is saying to me that I need to reassure you that everyone is listening to your every word, so you can be calm about that. And then when I mentioned Andrew now, he told me I need to ask you about your trick with the picking up the forefoot. That's something that you have mentioned. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny. This was one of Andrew's interviews at Crufts, or one of the World Challenge events many years ago. And it just goes to show another great handler was Mary Dukes in Sight Hounds. And she was the first and only person during that interview to inquire about it. I mean, when you know how crazy I am about muscle tone and conditioning. And I had a procedure that after the judge, if there were a judge that had some depth and was going to take the effort to feel for muscle tone, when they would leave the chest area and go to the loin, and it's the moment they started to put their hand to feel the upper thigh, I'd lift up the front leg just enough to get it off the floor, and it'd make the dog tense and judge it right under the hand. I mean, I could visually see the reaction, like, wow, this dog's, I could feel that muscle, my goodness. And it was just a technique that I learned. I mean, I learned from Jimmy Moses how to pull, like almost reverse logic. You pull the dog back when he wants to go, and he only wants to go more because you're pulling him back. I mean, if you watch me show Tristan, and one of the best examples is when I won Best Bitch at the World Show in Milan in the competition for the breed. You could see me pull back on the leash, and she would just bolt out all on her own volition. So these are subtle little things you pick up, and it's very funny. There was a great point of being shown by Mark Bettis, and I'm doing Best in Show, and I felt the muscle, and it wasn't there, and I showed him this trick. And because that's, to me, you have to share these things. I mean, Jimmy Moses, Dean Blake, Sonny, Frank, all these people took the time to share this with me. So I shared with them. I said, look, I don't know why this dog isn't as fit as he should be, but do this, lift up the front leg when the judge, right when he goes to do, just like I said. So I get the dog in for Best in Show maybe 3 or 4 months later, and I go to the muscle, and he remembered, but he remembered too late. And I said, too late.
Too late, yeah.
So you can
Okay.
have fun with this. You get someone like my mom, Lee. Lee was from day one bright and dedicated, the breeder's eye, so nice in the ring. People will tell you to this day, there's nobody better to show to than Lee because you could have a balance of seriousness. I mean, she took no shit from anybody either. I mean, but they also know don't do it because she'll get you. I had a little bit more of Werner Sheldon. I had a little bit of Steve Shaw, who was my mother's close friend until she moved to Florida, and then I inherited him. But I don't know if you know the name Steve Shaw. A lot of people
No.
listening will know this name. A famous handler, top clients, but so fastidious. I mean, he had a way. He said, "You stand here, face this way. You did it." Or death. And, I'm a little bit that way. I'm a little bit Ellsworth Gamble, who was another great influence on me. And Ellsworth had hands that his principle was once your hand touched the dog, it never left. And he could do things with the dog. And you think freestanding is fancy now? When Ellsworth Gamble judged, he'd go over your dog like liquid, like mercury flowing down the line. And he'd say, go down, stop, turn left, stop, turn left again, stop, then come back. And you'd go down and he'd see a rear standing on its own, a side on its own, and a front on its own. And that was it.
Yeah.
And they did it, and he never missed a great one. And I'll tell you a little story of how someone like Ellsworth Gamble, he showed the very first Crown Crest Afghans, and he showed many terriers. That was his biggest forte. But he was insanely famous for putting up puppies for the breed. I mean, over top winners. He could give a dog best in show on Saturday, on Sunday, beat it to a 6-9 puppy, to the point where it's very noticeable. And I said to him one day, I said, Ellsworth, why is it always the puppy that your eye gravitates to? And he'd say, Michael, our responsibility is to judge breeding stock. And he says, and when you see a quality entry, and then you see a quality puppy that could possibly be the next generation down from those great champions, and if that puppy has that much quality, that's the furthest down the line to move a breed forward for, and that's where I choose to reward. And that sticks with me. And let me tell you, it stuck with Annie, it stuck with Frank. I know it sticks with Andrew. And you see these people, and if they know enough and they take the breed to heart, as first you have to know what the puppy's supposed to look like at an age, which sometimes can be awkward. Those dogs never disappoint those moments, and most of them will support your decision. And some people, they may sting for a moment, but if they know dogs, they know that puppy's got that kind of greatness too.
Yeah, that's true. You mentioned now a little bit about your judging, and you started judging in 2000. Do you find it more exciting to judge dogs or to show dogs?
I think I have more to contribute as a judge. I think you can influence. I think, first of all, judges have a direct, serious impact on how people breed dogs. I mean, people especially entry level people, they will gravitate to a big winner. And, you need to reward the dog that can do the most good and the less harm for a breed. And as a judge, I could do that. My showing was a representation of myself and what I wanted to portray as what I felt was correct and beautiful about my given breed. And, I mean, that's just, I never considered myself a good handler. I know it sounds odd. I didn't have good posture. I guess I developed this funny little jump up as before I started to gait, and as I'd see films, like, oh God, I do this. And I showed my dog Simba when he was a puppy myself, and it had been 13 years since I've been in a ring. And some friends like Harry Bennett and stuff, they say, Michael's going to show, this is going to be horrible. And like, he came up to me and he says, my God, you haven't lost a step. I mean, you've gained a lot of weight, but you haven't lost this. even the little hop, So I call them inspirational moments. I'll go in the ring and show once, just to remind everybody.
Yeah.
Kay Finch did that once. She came east for the museum opening, and Sonny is already gone, and Kay loved Boy Blue, and she was 80 something years old. She took his leash on the front lawn and floated down and back. This was before video cameras, but it's etched in our minds what it looked like. I mean, it was such an inspiration. And I did it with Kid Sox at the World Show after he won the group and everybody was leaving after Best in Show. I just said to Ganella and Francis, I said, "Can I hold his leash for a minute?" I said, "I just want to see what he feels like." And I ran him up and all around that whole entire ring, and he was like driving a Citroen, just like floated.
Yeah.
And now Francis is running. "Oh my God, I got to do it again." And I said, "No, that was just for me."
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
you have to have these moments in the sport,
Of course, of course. And when you think about judging, what do you think is the most difficult thing about it?
The most difficult thing to do should be the easiest thing to do. And I was in a position when I was an AKC rep of moving judges along and guiding them and trying to direct them in procedural things. And that's to think like a breeder. You must think like a breeder. I mean, you can have a dog that's in beautiful coat and beautiful condition, and he goes and he doesn't put a foot down wrong, but he's plug ugly. Well, guess what? That other dog that's maybe not groomed as perfectly as yours, but owns the ground it stands on, built well, and maybe it's not showing 100%, as well as that other dog, but that dog can show better or worse on a given day, and the other dog will be ugly forever. So you have to have it in your mind, like, no, this is, if I was to breed my, and you break it down to the very, very basic core, and it sounds very elementary, but it works. Which dog would I breed my bitch to? Which one would I buy if I had a blank check? And that's your decision. And I've wrestled with this because my mother is a much more emotional type judge. She gets into the moment and sees things and feels things, and I'm more like, I gotta touch it. And I've got the Steve Shaw and Ellsworth thing. I gotta touch it. I gotta feel it. And but what do I do if the dog that doesn't feel as good at this, but raises the hair up on my neck? Who do I point to? And someone like Nigel or Bill Taylor would tell you, just point fast. They're not going to get better. And
That's true.
sometimes you go with the moment, and it's if it feels right, it probably is the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. Michael, let's do a series of these short questions that everybody finds very difficult. I'm sure they will be a little bit difficult for you too. And then I have a few more questions, and we are coming to the end. We are already for 1 hour, 40 minutes talking, and the time is passing so quick with you. But obviously, reading the comments from people who are listening, it's also really nice to have all these questions. Yvonne Bowles says best interview of them all. Simon Burton saying mesmerizing. I could listen for hours. I'm a disciple. Thank you so much. Julie is saying superb. I could listen to Mr. Canalizo talking dogs forever, and it would never ever get boring or tiring. Brilliant interview. I wish it never stopped. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm glad that people are really enjoying it. Anyhow, here are the Andrew Bray saying another hour, please. Andrew, don't push it. Anyhow, one of the shows that you judged and you will never forget.
I guess it has to be my national specialty.
Okay.
I mean, I've judged it at different events at it for a couple times, but when you're honored to do your national specialty, it has moments, and of course, it wasn't without drama. I mean, a dog that everyone thought I'd like, I did like. I'd never judged the dog. I don't think I ever saw the dog in my own personal life, and And the fact that it was the woman who was showing it, and we were in a funny ring with a big mound in the middle of it, and I'd say go up to the mound and let him stand. I mean, Connie Miller would have loved this because it's like Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And the one woman goes up the mound and and she twists her ankle, and this is like at the crucial last point after cuts after cuts after cuts. As a matter of fact, Augie was winner's dog with a black mass silver, a beautiful correct sized dog from from Norway, I guess. And winner's bitch was one of Ramon's under a different judge. From we don't the international level is at our national is huge, but this was an American bred dog shown by its breeder, and its co-breeder was one of my closest friends who had to come in, and I don't know if he was in Jerry Klein. I don't know if he was in shorts or not, but he was certainly not prepared, and he was like pushed into this moment, and he held on.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah,
the dog wound up winning the national the next year under another good breeder judge. So those are moments you
you never forget.
appreciate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. Best in show lineup you ever judged?
Best in show lineup I ever judged. The better question was the best in show lineup I was ever in. I'm going to answer that
Okay,
one.
okay.
I'm going to answer that one first because ugh, um, this is where you have to understand how dog people think. I went out to the Hound Classic. I think I won the breed that year at the specialty under Lottie Jorgensen. And then I win the breed under Donna. Oh God, nice girl from the Midwest. I win the breed, and Virginia Line is doing the group, and this is in June or July. And 3 months before, I was in a group under Virginia Line, and I went third in the Hound group on a Monday show. So but now I'm in this group, and I'm up against someone told me later 11 hounds that had won their national, including Treasure, Alabaster Treasure, the beautiful Saluki that Karen Black owned. That was, she was everything in Salukis that Trist was in Afghan hounds. And I can remember looking at everybody standing on chairs. It was just an amazing competition. And I go win the hound group. It was amazing. And Mrs. Diana Powers, who gave Trist her very first best in show ever, with Anna Stromberg showing her because I was on vacation with my friend Joel in Hawaii for my birthday. So I couldn't go there. And so that was Trist's very first best. She was doing best in show, and I want to say it might have been her retirement show, but she was a wonderful Irish Wolfhound breeder, and I went best in show under her. Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. These are the things you never forget. Anyhow, you mentioned Lotte Jorgensen, and she wrote you a message in the comment, "Love you." So she's also watching, and so
A lot of bodies and another one. She experienced the heyday. I mean, Jane should have been included in that list when all the other great ones, Boxer Dan, Hey Ma, Look at Me, and Jane, she sent me Jane. I sent her Sharp, who was Triumph's father, and I'll tell you a very funny story, and Lottie will know it, and she's probably going to send me a very terse text for revealing it when
okay.
I brought Tris to the Milan show, I co-owned her with Lottie for that show because there was some sort of it was easier to have a European or an FCI person on it. I don't remember what the reason was, but anyhow, she said to me she didn't show her dog Owen that day to she had Ulf show it to Paolo Dundino because she said to me, says Michael, if I win with Owen, he will put me over you with her. And she says, do you want me to show Tristan the breed? This is like minutes between going best bitch, and Trist would have gone with her, and I probably should have because as great a performance as it gave, the other dog didn't have any reason to lose it. And whether it's the element that you put up the dog you already put up or not, I didn't win best dog that day. So but she competed against great ones too.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me, Michael, favorite Afghan of all times, not bred or owned by you.
It's funny. I've seen some dogs that it's like I saw Kayam's Aries, and it's not a dog I would have ever bred to. It's not a dog that made sense to me in pedigree, but I never saw this dog when he shouldn't have won. You know, it was that kind of dog. So it's funny in all these interviews, Ante, I gotta give it to you. You're the first one to ever ask me what Afghan I ever saw that wasn't involved or bred by me.
You see?
Yeah. Let me think about it. I'll come that. Ask me
Okay,
at the
okay.
end of the
Come
interview.
later. Come later with the answer. The best grandeur dog for you.
The best grandeur dog, I give it to Blue Shark for the reasons I stated earlier. Triumph was my own dog. I bred him with Roger. He had a mind that understood me. He was a reactive dog, and if you have Afghans, you know what that meant. He would hear a sound or see something way out in the field long before you ever realized it, and he'd pull up over it. But he was a dog that was so smart. If the tents were flapping, he'd look up at that and like, I'm not going under that. That could fall on me. You know, those are the smart kind of dogs. I mean, the sighthounds, you know, when I see someone judge our breed and they're running them towards a solid wall, they don't know our breed. You can't run a sighthound towards a solid wall. They will stop 6 feet short, you know, and that's why they cut the corners.
Yeah. Okay, tell me the favorite win with your own dogs.
The favorite win with my own dogs.
Yeah, one dog. I mean, your favorite win when you were showing a dog.
Well, you know, you're talking not a grandeur dog, one of the Kandahar.
Doesn't matter. One dog that you showed. I mean, the favorite win that you did as an exhibitor.
Without a doubt, it was the best in show under Annie Clark at Louisville, over 5,000 dogs, which was a record in the day. And he was a young dog, and getting to him, I had to beat Storm Hill's Who's Zooming Who under a judge that previously had just given her a best in show, and I got out of the breed under J. Donald Jones that day. And I'm trying to remember who I won the group under that day. But all I know is I got to Annie Clark, and it was a total surprise. And she was sick as a dog, and it was just such a momentous win. And it was a win that sealed it, and it's really on par. You know, some great wins have great reactions. I mean, Trist's win under Ed Biven at Westchester. You use that picture in your little pop-up. That was the win that defined her most successful year, that brought her to being #1 dog of all breeds. Yeah. So you have moments like, and I beat 3 subsequent. The Papillon was in there, the Standard Schnauzer was in there, and I want to say maybe one other, but 2 dogs that would go on to win Best in Show at Westminster there. Yeah. So that carried a lot of weight.
Of course. One breed you never had at home and you would love to.
One breed that I never what?
That one breed that you never had at home, but you would love to own. You would not.
Sounds, you know, the breed I went to get, and this is again because it was compatible at my lifestyle at the time when I was a rep. I was going to get a toy fox terrier. I just thought the alert, fun little dog I have in the household. Evelyn has a Russell Terrier that I adore, and she loves me. And you know, but it's Evelyn's dog, and I've always had a scruffy dog in my life, a Wyandotte, and then a Parson Russell. But I came very close to securing a toy fox terrier. But my mother tells me, and I kind of love judging the breed, and the people support me with such beautiful ones, is a Tibetan Spaniel. I would own a Tibetan Spaniel. I mean,
they're pretty.
There's something about Afghans and the Tibetan breeds, Tibetan Mastiffs. I have an attraction to, Lhasas. I understand, and I judge them, and they hold up, and they don't get stupid under me. You know,
Yeah,
these dogs have great. I mean, when we're dealing with the species that can sniff out money and drugs and cancer, they can tell 30 feet away when you're walking, even if they can't see you.
yeah,
You're not
that's
going to
right.
be a good one to touch me.
Yeah, that's
You've
true.
shown losses. I mean, Javier
Yeah,
knows. I
yeah,
mean, you know exactly which one's gonna, you
yeah.
have to hold up
They are
for.
very special. Yes, I can agree about that. Okay, one dog person which is not alive anymore and you terribly miss.
That's Sonny and
Yeah.
Roger.
Okay. When you think about one breeder that comes year after year with top quality dogs, which breeder you would mention? One from the USA and one from the rest of the world. It can be
Well,
from Afghanistan. It
it's
can be
funny.
also from other.
I missed mentioning this breed, and I hope somebody shares it with her. But she didn't come from the U.S., but she's lived in it for the last 50 years, and that's Sylvia Hammerstrom. She
Hmm.
has bred a recognizable line. Whether you like it or not, she has to be given the credit for adhering to this her vision of the standard, just like Sonny did. And she again, she could do it through large numbers, and she was one that needs to be singled out as having that ability to do that. And a breeder from a foreign country. Ugh, I just might not be. I mean, in Afghan Hounds, it's Ramon Podesta. I mean, I've said it to him personally. If Roger was still alive and I was still active, we'd be breeding dogs together. You
Yeah,
know,
that.
we can't for other different reasons, but he's another one that, I mean, and I respect Ramon because any breed he involves himself with are beautiful. You
Yeah,
know,
I agree.
he's a beautiful person that understands judges like a breeder of every breed. I mean, I've seen him beat big winners in different countries, and without exception, you have to be prepared to do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tell me, Michael, one judge that you look at and you always have a huge admiration for his knowledge and presentation in the ring, and obviously somebody who is still active in judging. One person from the USA and one person from the rest of the world.
Okay, the that's a hard question because there's so many, but because he's on my mind, it's Frank Sabella.
Yeah, well, Frank is a very special person. That's no doubts about that.
Um, and I think of him often, and I know what he's taught me, but only because he encapsulates all of it, the drama, the beauty, the seriousness. I mean, let me tell you, he may float around the ring and he may be a little coarse at times with his language and a little flamboyant, but he knows those standards, and he knows instinctively when something special's in front of him.
That's for sure.
And why do you ask me the people that are either very ill or going? I mean, Rainer Vorian to me was one in
Yeah,
Europe. I know Hans Lentinen was a wonderful mind. I didn't know Hans at a level that so many people did know Hans, but Reiner to me was another one that could just encapsulate everything for the, and they were all good friends.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so who's
yeah.
living? That's a hard
I would,
question.
yeah, we can go with these two. I think these two persons definitely. Everybody who met them, and I was lucky enough to meet them a few times in my life. They are always been an incredibly inspiration and people with a huge knowledge and about dogs and passion and emotion about the dog world, the same like you, which obviously I incredibly admire. Okay, last of the difficult and short questions. One dog you judged and you will never forget.
Hmm. It's gonna be it's a contemporary dog, and it's not a known breed. I had a moment when I judged Westminster, and I did Basenji's, and I had about 20 specials. And the first dog in line was a dog I never saw, a person I never saw, but I just fell in love with this dog for his balance and and I've yet to beat him in best in shows or groups. He's a wonderful tri dog. Um, and he placed in the group at Westminster, owner handled by his breeder owner, under Pat Trotter, another breeder owner handled. But that dog, and I said to the lady, I said, if Roger was still alive, I'd be owning this dog with you
Yeah,
because he was
yeah,
that good a dog. But again, I have a little bit of my mother. It was a package. This is a dog that will never get to the level he should, maybe, unless the people are judges are fearless, which they should be, and knowledgeable, which they should be. And I've stood behind him, and I just recently stood in front of him, and there's mutual respect. And this woman, you know, I just think if someone could step forward and take a dog like that to show the world what the breed should look like, it probably
yeah,
just cost me doing the Basenji National in the next few
yeah,
years, but I don't care, and
yeah,
nobody else did because, again, and this is a Steve Shawism, and I live by it, and I'll die by it. And it was an Annie Clark. Annie Clark had a different saying. She'd say, "Point like it's the last time you'll ever point." Steve Shaw pounded into my head. When you look at a dog in that ring at that time, and it didn't matter if you've given it 10 wins or you've beaten it 10 times, you have to be able to look at this animal like you've never seen it before. And
yeah,
let me tell you, it's if you can wrap your head around it and absorb that, it is so freaking liberating because you can do it and you can walk out of that ring, and I don't care what anybody else says. That's how I called it on that moment.
yeah, yeah,
And it's again, it's the expectation every person deserves when they pay good money for your opinion. You should be able to give it to them without fear or favor, regardless, at
yeah.
any level.
I agree. Okay, we have a lot of people writing, of course, how much they like the interview. Nancy McLean saying, great interview. Lana Mihic loved this interview. Then Anna, I will just say Anna because the surname I cannot pronounce. So much fun to listen. I'm taking notes. And then Valerie Nunes Atkinson saying, Frank Sabella is an icon. And then you have a question from Espen and Oge. Anna Sabo is writing, Espen and Oge insist to know which Afghan you didn't breed or own was the best you thought. Age sends you a big like for pointing out correct Afghan coat and pattern.
All right, it's funny. I'm gonna say a dog that that just moved me. He moved me in the way I envisioned Sher Khan moved other people. And if you ever saw Sher Khan in real life, they said he was electric. He had a kinetic energy. And this dog was Coastwind Jacaranda. I've only seen him twice, and it's funny. There was one issue of Afghan Hound Review where Jacaranda was on one page and Sher Khan was on the other. And I put the two pages together after seeing this dog in life, and it was at the Arizona Specialty when Tom Stevenson judged. And this dog just had this raw primitiveness. And again, if he had flaws that I didn't particularly look at first, they were minimized by all the other wonderful things he had.
Yeah,
And that's another thing if you're judging dogs. Everyone's got a fault.
that's
It's
true.
it's you just have to let the good things rise above any of that.
Yeah,
And
that's
this
true.
dog, he Coastman obviously contributed a lot to the breed. They brought a lot of elements of type through the breed at a time when it needed it most. This dog wasn't incorporated. He had a one bitch, I think maybe Blue Hen or Jay Hafford had a Jacaranda daughter. Again, beautiful stuff about him. But that's a dog that always, if you would ask me in my top 10, he would always be in it.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Fair enough. Tell me, Michael, we have only few questions for the end of this interview, and one of them is about 2007 when you became the director of the American Kennel Club event management. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with the American Kennel Club, and maybe if you can say also because you were in charge of some of the top dog events. In the USA, when you compare them to the shows in other countries on other continents, how do you see see the
Well,
American show stand?
to me, at it was an aspiration. I mean, I always aspired to be an AKC rep, and obviously it transitioned into a different position over the years, because it was like full circle. Even Frank Sabella did a stint as a superintendent, and many other great judges. My friend Jimmy Mitchell was a judge, and Bobby Fischer was a judge before he became a rep, and different. You do it for different reasons, and the American Kennel Club needs to have some great solid dog people in there to help steer others around, whether it's in a capacity as moving ahead with new judges. I was fortunate to be brought in basically by Dennis Sprung and Ron Menaker, and Ron Menaker was the mover and the architect of the first AKC National Championship when it got off the ground, which again built its basis on honoring the breeder. We do an equal best bred by competition, and then along the lines, because both Ron and I were very active, international judges, we came up with we were approached by Eukanuba Europe to do the World Challenge, and we refined it, and we didn't quite know how it would go, and we didn't give it the prominence that it wound up with until we saw people standing 10 deep to see these dogs from all these countries and breeds we didn't even recognize. And in the first year or so, they may not have sent the very best ones, but when the FCI and the different countries realized how important it was, everybody sent their best. So, my mom tells a great story. She judged one year at the national championship, and she did poolies, and she comes running over, or she did the all breed shows, I don't know what, and she says, "Oh my God, I found this most gorgeous class bitch in poolies. Oh my God, I gave her the breed from the classes. I never saw anything so beautiful." And I said, "Leigh, calm down. That's the #1 dog in Australia. It's here for the World Challenge." And then you get the poor schmo that has the top terrier from, one country or this or that, and can't find it to give it reserve. Again, judge dogs like you know them or should know them, and the rest comes easy. But so that part of the Kennel Club, now I'm still a consultant for the Kennel Club, working on the national championship, really the nuts and bolts pieces of it, and helping them with the Meet the Breeds piece to it, because you need to have solid dog people involved, but the World Challenge was a great thing. I mean, I wish there was a way we could somehow reinvent it and give it the prominence it had. Yeah, well, I mean, you saw great dogs, you saw great breeders, and the sponsors of it, Eukanuba at the time, were very supportive. I mean, you were there. I mean, how it went. I mean,
absolutely.
I think that will always be a very memorable time for the dogs.
No doubt about that. Yeah, that has always been like a very special event, and I mean this kind of possibility, to see the top dogs from all around the world, which normally would not come to any other shows. It was just amazing. I agree with you. Okay, one of my last questions for you, Michael. You said you have been actively connected with the American Kennel Club. I want to ask you, how is the situation in the USA with the animal activists? Because, as you know, in Europe, we have all kinds of things, and we cannot crop and we cannot dog, and they will forbid now the breeding of brachycephalic breeds, and we cannot use the chain collars and the powders and sprays and table arms and all kinds of things. How is the situation in the USA?
The wonderful part is the American Kennel Club has taken a much stronger stance than people probably realize. I mean, yes, they are a registry, and yes, their main function is to register dogs and to protect the purity of the breeds and make sure they stay recognizable for the size and shape, blah blah. But we have an arm in the legislative department, and we have that has a total ear to the ground that gets in there and deactivates these attempts to mandatory spays and neuters, and the really it's getting far more traction, as it gets developed relationships within the government. We have our chief veterinary officer with Jerry Klein, who gets out there and answers the questions on purebred versus this, and sometimes the dumb questions, but he responds to all these, and I guess we're making good traction because the Canadian Veterinary Association just repealed the ban on docking and cropping. They're going back to the historic value that there is a reason to do this, and they're allowing people to have their choice. I mean, here it's still all right.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I
no,
didn't know that.
yeah, just very recently, I'd say within the last 2 weeks, I read up on it somewhere. But it takes a village, and it's a slow process. But I think people now are realizing we need to put good money after this. I mean, they're exposing these activists with the misuse of funds, and they don't really support the stray dogs like they purport themselves to do. They're funding their own bank accounts, offshore, retirement funds, and they do very little. I mean, here in the U.S., the major animal Humane Society and PETA, they have the lowest rating, and we rate charitable causes as to whether or not you should invest in them or donate to them, and they do very poorly. When you see the amount of money that they put aside for PR and legal and retirement compared to what they do for the actual dog, it's a disgrace. Yeah. So they're getting stronger about exposing it. Dogs in this country, and I think dogs in the world, are second only to the baby industry, and that's a known fact. And the fact that dogs, purposely bred dogs, can do what they do for bomb sniffing and drugs and all these things, they have such value. And one of the things that I think is helping is the fact that all the kennel clubs around the world are embracing herding trials and water sports and different lure coursing, things that the dogs were bred to do. The dogs are doing the function that they were originally bred to. The showing is like going to camp for a little while. You do it while they're young, but the fancy still. I just wish that people would understand not every dog's a show dog. I have a good breeder friend that raises Springer Spaniels, and look at the thing, and I say, well, which one are you keeping? And he says, I'm keeping this one and that one. The rest are going to pet homes. I said, but this is beautiful. He says, I just want this. I want a beautiful home for this beautiful dog. I want it to be happy for the rest of its life. It doesn't have to go to a show every weekend. And those are conscientious breeders. And breeders, I did that for years. I gave dogs away, and when it was time, you place them in the right kind of home, and you saw them occasionally, and you said, hey, this dog should have a title. I'd finish it in 10 shows and bring it back to its beautiful couch and pretty backyard. Yeah, that's all you know.
Of course, that's how things can be done. I mean, but it's all to finding the best way. And as you said, the American Kennel Club works very hard on many of these topics. And this is the reason why I think that in the States you have what we don't have in Europe, is that the general public actually supports breeders and purebred dogs in general. Here, what is the problem is that these activists are so strong that general public, normal people, they start to go against purebred dogs and responsible breeders, actually with no reason. But unfortunately, it's happening.
Yeah, well, we had a challenge. I mean, personally, it impacted me most flying with the dogs towards the end. I mean, I could fly my dogs, and then I get stopped, and here's Trish sitting in her little cage, her good-sized cage, with her little head on her feet, and they're like, I can't fly. That dog doesn't have 2 inches of clearance when she stands up. And I'm like, lady, I sit in my seat. I'm not a tall guy. I don't have 2 inches of clearance in my head to sit in the seat on the plane. I said,
Yeah.
she's perfectly relaxed. And they all have rules and rules. And she's giving me, well, you don't have a water bowl. She has to have. I said, I don't want water. She'll come out spilled. It says right on the thing, owner on board, do not open unless in closed room. And she's fighting me and fighting me. And finally, I just say to this lady, and this is going to shut you down when I finish this story anyhow. I looked at this lady. I said, ma'am, there are rules in some states that say sex and anything other than the missionary position's against the law. And she looks at me and she says, well, I never. And I looked and I said, somehow that doesn't surprise me. Call me a supervisor. And the supervisor comes. I tell him exactly the story, and he's biting his tongue not to laugh. And he says, approve this gentleman's dog for transit. I mean, you can get carried away with it, and the taking away our basic rights. I mean, that's what I worry most about. That is that somebody that's, just because you don't feel you should have a dog, don't own a dog,
Exactly.
but they do a lot more good, and they help the elderly, and they, AKC has a program for older people to have a dog, and made it so the rental properties have to be able to allow a dog. It's a known enhancement of quality of life to have a dog with you. Otherwise you will. There's so many reasons to own a purebred dog.
Yeah. Just you need to have a right way to communicate it to the people. I agree with you. Anyhow, Michael, we have come to the last question of tonight, and I mean, it was really amazing, and you yourself can look later on all the comments of people who were writing how much they have enjoyed the interview, because it was everything what I expected: passionate and emotionate, and a lot of knowledge and things that you can't learn just like this.
So how come I'm still single then, Ante?
I don't know, but we can work on that also. If you tell us what you need, we can make a little bit of promotion for you. Anyhow, my last question for you, Michael, for tonight would be, what would be your message for the young people who want to get involved with the sport, and how do you see the future of the sport?
I think a young person, first of all, you have to understand, basically a young person at the dog shows was brought there by their parents, as for the most part. I mean, I was very fortunate that my mom and dad both shared the passion and allowed it to foster. I have a wonderful brother and sister that are purebred dog owners, and they adore their dogs, but they have their successes in other ways. So when I see a young person and I share something with them, and encourage them, and it's usually like, you have no idea, you're so much better than I was, and I tell them, I play it, get a good education. If you're not doing good in school, you shouldn't be here at a dog show. Get a good job. There'll always be dog shows. There'll always be breeding stock. I mean, dog shows is a non-tactile competition that anyone can enter into with any degree of success without training, without this, it takes a little bit of funds and a good dog. Sometimes it's somebody with no funds and a great dog. And it's for anything, any ethnicity, anybody with any disability, people that are blind are showing dogs. I mean, it's a wonderful sport. I wish more people had, experience in it. And I don't think they'll ever go away. I just wish they'd get stronger opinions that stay with judging them as breeding stock rather than ornamental. It's, I didn't like the fact that most people put us on a level with an elitist sort of thing. And I wish it's reverted back to, it's a sportsman's thing, and dogs that could function can also have, beauty and a great mind and good condition. But dog shows will be with us for another couple 100 years.
Okay, I like that you are optimistic. We are not so optimistic in Europe usually, but yeah, let's hope for the best. I'm sure that many people who were watching this tonight have enjoyed it a lot, the same as me. And I hope that among young generations there are also people growing who are going to be an inspiration like you are to many today. Thanks once again, Michael, for this amazing interview. Thank you for your taking the time to talk to me. I wish you
Talk to
all the
you.
best.
I've been looking at you for 2 hours and 17 minutes. You know,
Exactly, you see, and you were saying 2 hours. You see, it passed like this.
it went
But
very quickly, I must
yeah,
say.
yeah, that's true.
Oh, good.
And
Thank you very much. Thank your Uncle Andrew for thinking of me, recommending me to it, and all the people that hopefully we'll all get together and another good showing around the
let's
world.
let's
When we
hope
get
we will meet.
past.
We will
Yes,
meet soon while this crazy thing finish. Okay,
yes.
thank you, Michael. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I really hope to see you soon somewhere.
Thank you, Ante.
Bye bye. Good night.
Bye. Ciao, ciao.